This is the Podcast Express coming at you with 5 Minutes of Trouble, the internet's only podcast where we discuss John Carpenter's legendary Big Trouble in Little China 5 minutes at a time. Guess what? I'm in the driver's seat this week. I'm your co-host, Brett Stillo.
I'm your other co-host, Josh Horowitz from the Wing Kong Exchange, and we have a new guest this week. For the first time in podcasting history on the internet, we present filmmaker and editor Ian Kezsbom. Welcome to the Podcast Express, Ian.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Ian, nice to meet you. Sorry you picked the day when I was driving. Whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I'm good. I'm going to hang on to the wheel while we do this.
It's okay. I like to live dangerously.
It's okay. You know, listeners, a little known fact, when we're doing these podcasts, Josh actually drives with his knees. He'll just holds the wheel like between it. It's really cool. So, but me, it's going to be 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, if you know what that means.
Yeah, it sounds good. Yeah, Ian, I've known for many years. He is an editor in Hollywood. He's done many different TV shows, and he's done. Have you done motion picture stuff, Ian?
I did a little bit when I first starting out, a bunch of independent films, but it's been mostly TV for the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
And he has one of the biggest film libraries that I've seen when I've gone to people's houses. I just remember wall covered with films, and I do believe that Big Trouble in Little China was one of those films.
It's definitely on there.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have a film library without it.
Mm-hmm. When was the first time you remember seeing Big Trouble, Ian?
Gosh, I was trying to think back to this. I'm pretty sure I saw it at home, not in the theater. But it was probably right when it came out on video. You know, we were a big VHS family back then.
Sure.
So, you know, that was one of the overplayed movies that my parents hated me watching over and over again.
Yeah, it probably got most of its fan base from video, I would think. It came out in film theaters in 86. Brett saw it for the first time there. I didn't see it until the year after on HBO.
You know, I was just thinking, you know, you guys have saw it so many times on cassette. That's one thing I never had the pan and scan experience with this movie, which I've only ever seen it on a big screen or on Blu-ray. So I've always been able to enjoy the fullness of, you know, the color, the lighting, the sets, and man, VHS. I would imagine this movie would look exceptionally dark on a VHS format.
Yeah, I mean, that was really the only version I knew for the longest time. I just remember, I think when I saw the movie on the big screen at one of those midnight showings one time, that I was able to finally notice, you know, little bits of richness, stuff off to the sides that always got cut off. I mean, like Lopan's pinky, for instance, that grows. I mean, that's something that gets cut off in the pan and scan.
Yeah.
I feel like every movie I've ever seen is kind of that way, though. Like my whole life was VHS growing up.
Right.
It's a whole new world when you finally get that Blu-ray theater experience. It's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, you have to think back just, you know, the novelty of being able to watch a movie at home. I mean, that was good enough back then with VHS. It's like, I can watch a James Bond movie whenever I want. Wow.
And do you remember when the VHS tapes cost like $200 to buy them?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Incredible.
Quick backstory, in the early 80s, I worked at a video store.
Oh.
And I think that's why I mentioned James Bond, because that was like the gold standard at the video store. This would be like 82, 83, 84. And I remember a guy doing just that. He like bought Goldfinger and this is $1983. It was like $200 back then.
Wow.
And that would be like $300, $400, $500 now. So, and he was the king of the world. I own a James Bond movie. I can watch this whenever I want.
Yeah, I mean, even back then, that was the equivalent of having like canisters of film and a projector at home. I mean, yeah, it wasn't something that most people had. It seems like so long ago, but it wasn't that long ago, actually.
I still have all my VHS tapes.
Do you?
Oh, yeah. They're in my parents' basement, but I got them all.
When was the last time you watched something on a VHS format?
Oh, God. It had to be probably back when I was in college. You know, that's like the late 90s.
Okay. Yeah. just this year I saw something on cassette, and it was more about, yeah, having the VHS experience of, tracking and that kind of blue tinted washed out look, and of course pan and scan,
Of course.
because you really don't want to see everything. You want to have some mystery. What's happening beyond the borders?
Yeah. I've actually found that I am using VHS tapes even now, mostly for my kids. I'll go to one of those Goodwill stores, and they have just VHS tapes for $1, and all these Disney films. I can just pop them in the VHS. My kids don't care.
Yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, no, it still has its uses. But let's start discussing this episode. We're talking about minutes 70 through 75 of Big Trouble in Little China. Minute 70 start with a Chang Sing being eaten by a monster in the tunnels under Chinatown, and they end with Lo Pan communicating with Egg and Company through the Guardian, the eyeball Guardian. Lots happen in this episode. Lots of sets, lots of neat characters, and let's get started.
Yeah. Well, reviewing these 5 minutes, I found myself saying, this is a really good movie. Wow. There's a deceptive amount of stuff that happens in this 5-minute segment, and I wasn't expecting it. I just thought this was going to be, a fair amount of exposition, getting ready for the big battle coming.
Mhm.
But I was surprised and like, yeah, wow, this sure is a good movie. Surprise.
Yeah, I mean, you have elements in these minutes of what makes this a John Carpenter film. You've got the sort of freak out monster moments. You've got the snappy dialogue, the neat sets. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in this 5 minutes, this is where Egg really comes into his own.
Mm-hmm.
He's gone from, goofy tour guide to crazy wizard to, well, as this segment opens, he is a wizard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at a time when wizards weren't quite as prominent in film. No Harry Potter at this time.
Yeah, that's a good point. He was, Egg would be a loner. He would be an icon. Nowadays, wizards come dime a dozen. But
I don't know. I'm trying to think of some good movies now with wizards from the 80s. Right? Yeah, the Masters of the Universe movie. What year was that?
That was about 85, wasn't it?
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Leo McKern in Lady Hawk. Was he a wizard or a sage? But he was.
It's close enough.
Yeah, he was definitely like, because one important thing in having a wizard in an adventure is he's also the exposition guy. And that's kind of what I remember him doing in Lady Hawk was, so you're wondering where he goes at night.
Mm-hmm. And I love here that Jack kind of calls him out on that. Just tells him to shut up and let's move on with the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just wants him to, get on with it, sure. But I mean, at this point when we start out the minutes, I mean, we have that, that monster that just sort of jumped out, and in the previous minutes we saw that Egg had actually pulled out his weapon of choice, which we're going to be seeing a bit in upcoming minutes, which are these kind of magic grenades, these special beads. In the previous one, it's like he kind of shined a flashlight on them, and then he threw it into the hole. My question here is, when I watched this the first time, I wasn't quite sure. Was he pulling him out and shining with the flashlight because he wanted to try to see which one was the right bead, or was that something that activated it?
I'm going to say the latter. That, Egg is a good wizard. He is a wizard of light, so he needs light, but he's in a dark tunnel. So he needs the flashlight to activate his magic. I'm going to go write a dissertation on that now.
I'd have to agree, given that through the rest of the movie, every time he throws them, they do have pretty much the same effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We'd expect to see something different there, wouldn't you think?
Yeah.
For a different situation. Although he does miss a lot too.
Well,
that's true.
I think that's part of Egg's charm is we're seeing him in these minutes coming up. He's a badass, but he's a somewhat inept, clumsy badass. And he's having the time of his life here. One of his men has just been eaten, And he's just like, "Hey, did you see that?" And then we have a classic line by Jack. What? Huh?
Yeah, what'll come out no more.
Yeah, what'll come out? And it's that his voice cracks a little. This is the voice of the 10-year-old Jack we hear from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
He said, this is the I want to go home guy.
Yeah, he's genuinely freaked out at this point. He can't wrap his head around everything that's happening around him.
He sure can.
He's kind of the audience Jack. He's like what we're thinking, what we would be. He's me in that situation. Well, I would have ran from that tunnel screaming, but he's what we think we would be in that situation.
That's true.
Yeah.
Especially at the beginning when there's just so much happening and you're not quite sure what's going on. Jack too feels very clueless, though he will make his transition. I think once he drinks the contents of the 6-demon bag, then his transformation into accepting it all is kind of complete. But that comes later.
Yeah, you guys have just hit on something I've never really thought of before, and it goes back to my youth when I would go to these movies in the 80s with the gang, a big bunch of guys. We'd go see Wrath of Khan or Big Trouble. When I went to see Big Trouble, it was with the guys. And it seems like inevitably there was always one guy who was the grouchy, doubting guy. Oh, come on, that would never really happen. What, like wizards and monsters in Chinatown? Yeah, I guess that is somewhat unrealistic. But yeah, there'd be this guy who kind of had the same tone as Jack. I remember when I went to see Raiders of the Lost Ark and there was a doubting guy. Really? Oh, come on. And, I'm not friends with that guy anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but yeah, it seems like it would be a different guy every time. But there was one guy who just had to be the party pooper and say, "Oh, that's totally unrealistic." Yeah, a real monster would behave much differently.
But of course, having somebody like that in your group gives you something to talk about for the next half hour as you're walking back to your car.
Yeah,
or to make fun of the guy.
Yeah. And that's what Jack is. Jack is that guy who's, Egg's having the time of his life. Jack's trying to ruin the party. Oh, what is this? That's totally a matte painting.
And then moving on, we then jump straight back into the Wing Kong, and we get our first glimpse of Gracie and Miao Yin in their new outfits, these very ornate, elaborate Chinese dresses and their makeup. And the thing I noted here was that, again, going back to the first draft W.D. Richter script, it's a little bit different here. The screenplay has a scene where Gracie's actually half drugged and she's trying to resist as a bunch of female Wing Kong guards are dressing her and Miao Yin for the wedding. And she wonders out loud where Jack is. You're like, "Oh, Jack, where are you?" And it just seems like it weakens her character. I can see why they may not have wanted to do that. She's not really pining for Jack too much in the film version that we see, and that's the Gracie I know. She's not a helpless type of female. She's very much what was the term you used? Like a Hawksian female, like Howard Hawks.
Like a classic 40s. Yeah, Howard Hawks, wisecracking dame. Yeah, and in this little scene, this little bit she has, it is quite the opposite. She does an anti-wink. She opens that one eye. It's very comical, but it's very Gracie. You almost get the feeling like in the previous scene, was she faking it? And is she, oh yeah, she's drugged, she's out of it. No, I'm not. I'm Gracie Law. I'm a lawyer. I fight for the rights of immigrants. And yeah, she's opening that eye because she wants to do her. I'm Gracie Law. There's nobody around for her to say that.
And notice once she opens that eye, again, we get the little chord in the soundtrack that lets you know that she opened her eye.
Right. Right.
Just in case we missed it.
Yeah. Yeah, she doesn't seem to have much time to do anything before Lightning comes in, though. And when he does come, notice he's not wearing his straw hat. He just comes in, he's got that awesome cape, he's got to do that dramatic unfurl. And then he does his lightning bit, which I was commenting to Ian earlier. I mean, it's cool looking lightning. All the animation effects that they did for this film when it came to the lightning is just great. It feels alive. It doesn't look like it's fake.
Well, I mean, I remember, when I was a kid watching this, everything in this movie looked real. I was about 10 years old. Everything seemed real. And I'm watching it now. I watched this movie again this morning, and I'm like, how did I find that real? But my 4-year-old walked in as I was watching, and he kind of ran out of the room screaming. So I guess I guess to a small mind, a lot of this. I mean, this movie, this terrified me as a kid. I loved it. I watched it over and over again, but to be scared. And this scene right here, I was telling Josh earlier, this is one of the scenes that scared me more than any. When those eyes open up and they're white.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
I was worried that would happen to me one day.
Oh,
You know?
I had a somewhat similar thought that, yeah, it's very subtle, but it's very creepy.
hmm
We just had a monster come out of a hole in a cave and eat a guy, which is a very John Carpenter moment. But that's nothing compared to a beautiful woman opening her eyes and there's nothing there.
hmm
And
I was also worried a monster would come out of the cave and eat me too. So that's,
again, it is a Carpenter movie, and yeah, I think that's what one thing it helps is it's not a true horror film, but there's enough shocks here and there that keep you on the edge of your seat.
hmm Yeah.
And but yeah, this is a movie about eyes, green eyes, a fellow with a lot of eyes who's going to show up in a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
and
And white
in this
eyes.
case, and white eyes. So it's a very, if you will, visual movie.
Yeah, this marks two instances of contact lenses. The green contact lenses for both actresses, and now the white contact lenses.
Wow.
Yeah.
It must have been a rough shoot for Kim Cattrall. Just a lot of Visine.
I like the sound effect when they open their eyes. Adds to the freakiness of it all. Yeah. But yeah, you guys are right. When I was a kid, I do remember that was kind of a little bit of a freak out moment, and I kind of was happy when later on they open their eyes and they don't have that white thing going on anymore.
Yeah, it's very creepy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just contact lenses. And even I was saying that myself a little while ago. Oh, those are just contact lenses, right? Right? I mean, I had to sort of remind myself, hey, in our world, we like pupils.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the simplest effects that are the most effective.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then we return back to the tunnels. We get a new music cue from the soundtrack. It's called Into the Spirit Path. This is actually one of my favorite of the different tracks on the album. It's got the, again, sort of the mixture of the Asian feel along with, elements which will come later of some of the 80s synth soundtrack stuff. A good testament to John Carpenter and Alan Howarth. Those guys had one of their best soundtracks, I think, in Big Trouble in Little China.
Yeah. It's just a transitional sequence, but the score really pops here. And one thought that came to mind was this is the kind of transitional music you would use in a lot of different scenes. Like I could see, if this was a series, if they did Big Trouble a series, this would be a sequence that they'd use all the time. It would become one of those little trademark things.
Huh. Yeah, no, it could be. I love the fact that Jack lands in a big pile of fish, though. How many movies with heroes do you see that happen?
Yeah.
While holding a dagger in his mouth. Don't forget that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that can't be very safe if that was a real knife.
I'd like to think they discussed that. In this movie, it's a fantasy, but, they inject bits of realism here and there. What if that really happened? And yeah, how come the hero never cuts his lip or goes, ow? Or, worst case scenario, yeah, you just, have two big gashes in your face.
Oh.
But
well, it's Jack Burton, he doesn't get cut.
No,
it is all in the reflexes. And you must remember the reflexes go all the way to the jaw and the teeth. So yeah, it's all in the reflexes. Once again, he made it look easy.
Though I do remember, I forget, somebody was posting on the truck stop that, when they say it's all in the reflexes, is he referring to maybe his boots?
Yes.
That's the name of his boots. The reflexes.
Yeah, I'd like to think he names his shoes. I have such an issue with those shoes that, yeah, I'd like to just, from this point on, refer to them as the reflexes.
The Ren Fair moccasins, yeah.
The Ren Fair moccasin boots that I have very mixed emotions about, but we won't get into that now. I think I've covered it in previous episodes. You all know how I feel about those boots.
Well, Wang makes a mention about the place that they're in is called the Wing Kong Storeroom Emergency Provisions. So what does that mean? How does he know it's for an emergency? I mean, do they eat raw fish in an emergency?
If you're ever in trouble, you need a pile of fish. That's what I always say.
To me, it just rings of a very W.D. Richter kind of an idea. It's like, the watermelon in the hallway in Buckaroo Banzai. It's just, oh yeah, we have a big room full of fish. Okay. Like, do the Wing Kong have an army of trained seals? I don't know. But one thing I wonder is that one guy on their team, he bites the head off of that fish.
Yes.
And part of me just says, okay, that was a stunt fish. That was a prop. That was a cleverly disguised croissant. But knowing that all these guys in this team are stuntmen and dedicated stuntmen, I'll bet you he'd said, yeah, I'll bite a head off a fish and eat it.
Yeah,
No problem.
I think that's a real fish.
Yeah.
It certainly looks like one.
Yeah. I have a note about the fish eater. That's actually stunt coordinator and Chang Sing Kenny Endoso. He was one of the three people who were involved, along with I think James Liu and
no, there's James Liu and then
Jim Lau. That's who it
Jim
was.
Lau.
Jim Lau was the other martial arts consultant. Yeah. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that is Kenny eating a real fish, and that is part of the original screenplay. That complete where he eats the head off, and then Jack says later, yeah. So yeah, good for Kenny eating the fish.
Hey, I'd do it for a close up. Actually, come to think of it, here I am saying, "Ooh, he ate a fish," but no. Hey, you get a close up, and you get a scene with Kurt Russell. So, yeah, I'll do it. It's just the thought of doing multiple takes with it. That's where it gets a little rough. That might be fish head like 12.
I could just see a cut scene where they're doing all those takes, and every time Kurt Russell says later, and then finally he finally says all right, fine. He just takes and eats the rest of it. And then moving forward, Egg has some bad news. Ready?
Yeah.
I like the fact that he's very precise about the year when he mentions it. He says 2,258 years ago, which makes it, if it's 1986, then that is 272 BCE. So very, very precise. Sovereign emperor who subjugated Lo Pan and made him no flesh. When I heard that as a kid, I used to think he said low flesh, but yeah, no flesh.
That's the medical condition. When you look up Lo Pan's condition, it's named after him. It's called low flesh. It means you're a living ghost, and you're not dead, but you suffer from the Lo Pan's disease, which is low flesh.
Yeah, this whole setup is basically there to ratchet up the tension, because now we find out that Lo Pan has to actually kill the girl that he marries.
Yeah, good revelation. It brings things up a notch.
Mm-hmm.
It also is like, there have been these exposition explosions throughout the movie, but oftentimes the character is like Wang, for example, is, I don't know, it's a legend. They say this and 3,000 years ago, and it's been a bit vague. Like the characters aren't certain, but here, yeah, Egg's just laying it out. Yes. Lo Pan, 2,258 years ago, 7 months and 2 weeks and 14 days. This is what happened with Lo Pan, and it was the emperor cast a curse, and yeah, he's cursed to live without flesh.
Mm-hmm.
He is, quote, an evil dream.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting though. As an editor, we hate exposition. It kind of often will slow a show or movie down. You want to kind of like let the audience figure things out on their own. So here he is laying everything out, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is a big speech, and Jack just jumps in and says, okay, that's enough. Let's move on. And that's the editor in me saying, thank you. We got it. But, he could have gone on. I have a feeling he was going to talk for another 15, 20 minutes if Jack hadn't stepped in there. So he's like, the audience gets it. Let's go fight monsters.
Good point. Yeah.
Thank you, Jack.
Yeah. And, and Egg's using, he's referring to this evil dream, and only a dream can kill a dream. That's such a cool line.
Hmm.
Only a dream can kill a dream. It's like on the side he was writing lyrics for 80s synth pop songs.
Well, he talks about a lot of interesting things in this speech. One of the things that he refers to is called the Bodhisattva of the underworld, the ultimate evil spirit. So I had to look that up. What does the Bodhisattva actually mean? Well, according to Wikipedia, it's a Buddhist term for anybody who, motivated by great compassion, has generated bodhicitta, or a spontaneous desire to attain Buddhahood, a state of awakening. And according to East Asian Mahayana Buddhism, the bodhisattva of the underworld, or hell, may be somebody called Kashitsgarba. Hold on. Kashitigarba, a monk who vowed to only reach Buddhahood once the hells were emptied. So there's some basis on this. There was actually this monk in this form of East Asian Buddhism who was this bodhisattva of the underworld. But of course, Egg's referring to Lopan as this. So there's some references here, and not the same person, but interesting, just kind of stuff. It's actually related to some of this religious things.
Yeah. Once again, it's Richter, not just being a hack screenwriter and making things up, actually doing his homework and going back and giving us a little bit of anthropology and culture. You see, you can learn things from movies.
Yeah. It's interesting. I used to do this a lot whenever I would watch a movie, in a theater or on video. Like I remember I watched the movie Glory a long time ago, about the Civil War. And it actually made me want to go to, well, there was no Wikipedia back then. I actually opened up an encyclopedia and I looked up, the Regiment of Massachusetts and those battles. And I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff out there if you have the interest and the desire to go into that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, there has always been an argument about, a movie like Glory is a good example where in telling the story on screen, there are certain conventions, certain compromises, characters are often, you have composite characters, one person in the movie represents several people. So, that there's always the issue of, historical accuracy, quote unquote, and, getting it right, getting it wrong. But I think what you just said is you see a movie that has some basis in history and it inspires you to, go look that up. And, then you find out what really happened. That's so many movies have done that to me.
Yeah.
Where I know, okay, this is a movie, but I know this actually happened on some level. So what's the real story? And yeah, I always find that, I can have my cake and eat it too. I can have there's the movie. Great Escape is a great example of this. Sorry while I'm tangenting. There's the movie The Great Escape, one of my favorite movies. Steve McQueen jumping over that barbed wire fence on the motorcycle. Great stuff. But then you read about the actual Great Escape, and it's much more in depth. There are far more interesting characters. Yeah, Steve McQueen his character is a composite of about 3 or 4 guys. But I still love The Great Escape. I still think it's a great movie, but I can have both stories and enjoy both. So there.
And in some cases, yeah, people are inspired to want to do things just from watching certain movies. I mean, I think Pete Mummert, he decided to get into archaeology. Is that right? From watching Indiana Jones, and Dennis Rule from doing watching some of the stunt movies. He wanted to go into that, and Desmond. So it inspires people. These movies.
Yeah. Does it count that I got into editing because I watched movies?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
This is this is one of the movies that led you to your career today.
Exactly.
Would you say there was one movie in particular that really got you interested in editing, Ian?
Well, honestly, I actually kind of fell into editing. I was always interested in filmmaking. I didn't even really, as a kid, know what an editor was. So it wasn't something I ever quite aspired to be. But, I think it's similar for all of us. It was the Spielberg movies as a kid. It was the Raiders and Jaws, or the, going into Lucas's Star Wars, those things that I would watch 800 million times on VHS. Sometimes not even the actual. Sometimes it was VHS taped off TV. By the way, so like,
Ah,
and that was back in the day where like I had to hit pause every time there was a commercial.
Oh, yes.
So for
that's
years I was missing a
dedication.
scene in Star Wars and didn't even know that it existed because I hadn't hit unpause quick enough when it came back. But no, it was those movies, like it was those fantasy movies, these big adventure, things like Big Trouble in Little China, which is why I focus mostly on half-hour comedies right now because they're very similar. Uh, but no, it was a lot of that stuff, and it was what made me want to get into filmmaking.
Yeah. So Ian, here's a question for you, because
Mhm.
editing is one aspect of this movie we haven't talked about a lot. And I think because, it's such a fluid movie, maybe we take the editing here for granted because the thing moves really well. It's well paced. Even today, 30 years later, just moves right along. And I think it's the subtlety of editing. You don't notice how well it's cut because you're just in it. And part of that is
Mhm.
editing. And so, yeah, I would just say as an editor, how would you, rate it or critique it? What do you think of the editing in this movie from 30 years ago?
Well, it's kind of like you say, like we always joke that editing awards are kind of silly because the best editor you didn't notice he edited.
Hmm.
And this movie's very good, and it what it does, it uses a lot of humor to kind of propel the story along, which is always helpful. So you've got these big action set pieces, but then you'll that pacing is always helped by things like, Jack's reaction to eating a piece of fish
Hmm.
and things
Right.
like that just kind of push that story forward while keeping you there. It's just going back to that exposition thing I said. That scene could have gone on for a long time. But a lot of that in the editing and writing is let's move it forward. Let's make this interesting so that we're interested in what Egg is saying, but not bored. And this movie does quite a good job of that.
Hmm. Yeah, the editors on this one, I'd never heard of them before. Steve Merkovich, Mark Warner, Edward A. Warshilka. Have you ever heard of those guys before?
I mean, just from this movie,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm not. I wouldn't say as an editor, I wouldn't say I'm the foremost authority on editors in the world. We're like any other job. We're in our little circle there of people.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they did a great job, and it's not uncommon to have multiple editors on something this big too.
Yeah, I have a feeling that these are probably the same editors that were on several of John Carpenter's films, if I were to look this
Yeah.
up on IMDb. But yeah, the last thing I really have to say about this scene before we move on, Egg makes a comment that he says that he's waited for this for a long time. So my question is, how old is Egg? I mean, sure, he looks like he's probably in his 60s in this, but I have a feeling that he is probably a sorcerer who has been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and has been facing Lopan many times in the past. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think the way he delivered that line, it's subtle, but the way he accents it, yeah, you kind of you might miss it the first time, but then you think, and also his, as I said earlier, his tone is changing. He's gone from goofy tour guide to this formidable wizard, and here when he delivers that line, it's like I've waited a long time for this. He's echoing Alec Guinness a little bit.
Long
Name
time.
I've not heard in a long, long time.
I, I've often wondered if he's even real.
Huh.
It was always, jumping out of our 5 minutes at the end of the movie, he kind of walks off into a cloud of smoke. He only really engages, little Pan at the end there while everybody else fights around him. He's spewing this nonsense. He comes to stop him and then he leaves, ignoring that first scene with the lawyer.
Here's a fun one, and I'll do a shout out to Pete. We know the story that the Chinese emperor put the curse on Lopan. Maybe he had a court wizard who actually did the dirty, and maybe it was Egg.
Oh.
So Lopan probably would have mentioned that in the big fight scene coming up. Hey, I remember you, but it's a fun little bit of speculation.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of, nerding out on this movie is that he does refer to Egg as having peasant magic.
Oh yeah, that's
Yep.
coming up too. Yeah. So
No, I think part of the charm is just that we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
He's this mysterious character.
Yeah.
It's what's he going to do next? Who is he?
Yeah. And here we are. We've spent the last 5 minutes speculating about Egg. So yeah, it totally works.
Right.
No, I don't think he's real. No, I think it's actually Victor Wong having a dream that he's Egg Shen, and it's got to have more Egg Shen fan fiction. That's all there is to it.
Well, it could set up something for a potential prequel to this film if you wanted to. Just Egg Shen throughout history trying to fight Lo Pan, and all the different Jack Burton type characters that he encounters throughout history. No, somebody's got to pen that one.
I'd be happy to edit that.
There we go.
Big Trouble fan film. We'll talk about this after the podcast.
Yeah, that reminds me, actually, on the truck stop, there was somebody who posted this really neat picture. It was like a take on the poster of Big Trouble in Little China, and actually it showed Egg Shen. And I forget what it was. I've got to take a look there, but as if it were a prequel.
Yeah, it had kind of a Harry Potter-esque title, like, Egg Shen and the 6 Bags of Magic.
Or the 6 Demon Bag, that's what it was.
The 6 Demon Bag,
there we go.
Yeah. You're right, it's a prequel. How he got the 6 Demon Bag. Who were the 6 demons?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, the possibilities are endless.
Indeed. Well, moving on, we're back in the Wing Kong hallway. We get to see the stone set of the Wing Kong hallway with many Wing Kong and those elaborate Chinese ceremonial guards, which look a lot like the statues which are against the wall.
Yeah.
And that's part of the costume designer, April Ferry. She did the costumes for Big Trouble in Little China. She now does stuff for Game of Thrones. But yeah, all of her elaborate work is shown off here. I mean, those ceremonial guards, they look really cool. And, these are functional walk-around outfits. Pretty neat.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite lines from Jack, are they real?
Yeah. As he's at this point, he's still not certain what's going on.
Yeah, this is the section where he's got all his questions for Egg, and he answers them the same way. It's just awesome.
Yeah.
Good, thought so.
Yeah, watching this scene and seeing these guys in the elaborate masks, it made me wonder: are those Wing Kong employees? When you're hired by the Wing Kong, do you end up do you get mask and sword training? Because they're faceless. It's kind of an allusion to stormtroopers or Cylons or the many faceless guards in movies of this era. But it's like, well, who are those guys? And
maybe they're the elite sort of ceremonial Wing Kong who have, I guess, made it to the next level. They get more benefits on their on their different employee plans.
You start off in the mailroom and you end up with a bronze mask.
The screenplay at this point mentions that when Jack is asking all these questions, it actually says Jack's gone over the edge and living this nightmare full out now.
Yeah,
I'll buy that.
Yeah, I'd say Kurt Russell definitely read that and took it to heart.
And then we get our first glimpse of the Great Arcade. This is that neon set where the wedding is taking place. I think we'll save a full discussion for this for the next episode when we're really going to get a shot of it. But we do see an amazing silhouette shot of Miao Yin's headdress as she takes that escalator down with lightning. So I guess in this case, it was Lightning who gets to send away the brides. Lucky guy.
I just love that in this great underground temple, they have an escalator.
Yeah.
That's always been my favorite part.
Yeah. Well, it's always like, Evil Temple meets Southern California shopping mall. It could also be called the Galleria of Doom.
Yeah. It does have a very sort of Temple of Doom type feel to it all, doesn't it?
Yeah. But with these, very modern or contemporary 1980s bits like, neon.
Mm-hmm.
And, like you just mentioned, Ian, the escalator. You could almost hear Muzak playing.
Oh, that would have been awesome.
As they're coming down the escalator, you could almost picture Phoebe Cates and Jennifer Jason Leigh coming down in the makeup. It's like Jeff Spicoli shows up. So, wrong movie.
So I have a question here. So This is a wedding. This is the what do you call that? The processional, I guess, when the brides come down. Should they have tried contacting Miao Yin and Gracie's parents? Should they have been at this ceremony? And my guess is maybe Lo Pan actually tried to do this during the wheelchair scene. You remember how he was asking Wang about Miao Yin's parents? Maybe he wanted to get their address so he could send them a wedding invitation. It would have been nice.
I can picture Lo Pan doing that, but I can also picture after the ceremony him eating them. Or feeding them to the Yeren or the Guardian or any one of a number of beasties. But I could say, oh, welcome. It's so nice you could make it. And then, he cuts their throats.
My next question on this one was, so do you think, what was going to happen after the wedding? I mean, was there some sort of a reception hall next door? Was there going to be food, drink, dancing, maybe a band? Is there some sort of a Chinese equivalent of doing the hora at these weddings?
Maybe that's what all the fish were for.
That was going to be their meal.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a warehouse full of fish. It's like Lo Pan's favorite meal. Okay, the guy has been a living ghost for 2,000 years. He's got to be starving. So, he hasn't had a real meal in like 2,000 years. So probably, he just like, I could eat a whole warehouse full of fish, literally. Yeah, I'll say this, whatever Lo Pan has planned for after the wedding, it's going to go wrong and he's going to be really annoyed. This really pisses me off. This is not the cake I ordered. Why can't I get the cake I ordered? It's you got to remember Lo Pan is a supervillain, but it just never goes the way he quite wants it. Or maybe his expectations are too high. Somebody's going to be re-recording it and, the camera doesn't work. And he's like, he pounds on it. Japanese, So, I think that's a key thing to remember with Lo Pan. He has elaborate schemes and plans like every other villain, but his expectations are so high. So something goes wrong and he just, why is this happening now?
Mm-hmm.
we, not to jump too far ahead, but we do see hints of that in upcoming scenes where Lo Pan is, it's not the wedding of his dreams, but who does have the wedding of their dreams? So something always goes wrong.
Yeah, no, that's true. We do see the attendees of the wedding here. In addition to the ceremonial guards, we get to see our friends Gerald Akamura and Ao Liang once again, along with the Wing Kong fighters. Gerald having ditched his guns for these gleaming axes this time.
Ran out of bullets.
Yeah.
And nice to see Al and Gerald standing together like that next to each other. I'm sure in real life they were old pals, but and it's kind of nice to see him. And Al looks slightly less pissed off.
Yeah, they're actually kind of serene in this moment. They're not too
it's
upset.
Actually a slightly less crazy Al Liang, which is rare scene.
And we get a cool look at the 6-armed green neon accented statue. My first thought when I saw this, having seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, I thought that was the statue of Kali. But no, I think it's actually a statue of something called an Asura. And looking this one up on Wikipedia, it says that an Asura in Buddhism is the lowest rank of deity demigod of the desire realm. And in this realm, which is a place that's actually above heaven and hell, beings find happiness through sensual desire, which causes them suffering. And so I thought, well, like Lo Pan's desire for green-eyed girls, maybe, that's caused him to suffer for 2,000 years of torment. So maybe it's appropriate that he's got a representation of Asura, where desire causes suffering.
Again, that's that cool background stuff.
Mm-hmm. And there's your 5 minutes of Buddhism.
5 minutes of Buddhism. That you get at the Cineplex. Pretty cool.
And let's see. Anything else for the arcade before we move on? No video games in this arcade, unfortunately. Oh, actually, well, there kind of will be.
No, that's not true. Later there is.
That's right.
Coming up. I can tell we're all excited. We want to talk about the ensuing minutes, but we got to save that.
Mm-hmm.
Tune in next week.
Well, then we return once again to the Wing Kong hallway, and we get our first glimpse of the Eyeball Guardian, the floating eye. And the notes I have here, this was created by visual arts director George Jensen and special effects artist Screaming Mad George of Boss Film Studios. That's his name, Screaming Mad George.
I'm familiar with that gentleman. Yeah.
Oh, you've heard that name before?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. That name. You see that name in credits.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall specifically something he's worked on, but I know busy guy in the '80s. That's for sure. And you look at him, the Guardian, and I was going to say if you look at his eyes, but it's like, yeah, which one?
Which one?
Because I think this is the first time I've noticed he has eyes literally in the back of his head.
Yes.
Which is a nice...
And they open and close too. They're all fully articulated. They did a lot of work on that.
I'm assuming he was like a stop motion figure that then matted into the scene. It's really good, pre CGI kind of effects. But also it's something in his main eyes, his primary eyes. He reminds me of Slimer from Ghostbusters 2 years earlier. I think it's also that big mouth. I mean, he's more goofy than scary, although, and also he's really gross.
Well, he still terrified me as a kid. I'm looking at him now. He's so silly. But like as a little kid, my reaction was Jack's reaction, which I think here is really fantastic.
He's just
it is a good
God, yeah.
Yeah, and just when you think it couldn't get worse, this guy shows up.
You have the music too that it's got this sort of sinking, like type feel to it when the Guardian shows up. I looked this up on the internet. There was an article in a website called monsterlegacy.net, and I'll put that up in the glove compartment on the website. But
nice.
Apparently, Steve Johnson of Boss Film Studios, he mentioned that everything on the floating eye was actually a problem because it was supposed to have 30 working eyes, make all sorts of faces, and fly. And ultimately, it took 24 puppeteers to operate the Guardian in front of a blue screen. So it was a physical puppet that they were doing in real time on a blue screen. And there's a whole bunch of neat pictures and behind-the-scenes details on this article. I'll make sure to post it.
Oh, yeah. I'm really excited to look at that. Here I said just a moment ago, it must be stop motion. But, 24 technicians all trying to work in sync with that guy. What a nightmare.
There's a shot where you can see them from off to the side, and you see some of the people that are actually working on it in front of or behind the screen. And quite a technical feat.
That must have been a long day. I'm picturing, they're trying to do a take, and one of those 24 guys says, "Oh, my hose is jammed up. It's not working." Cut. Very difficult actor to work with, especially when he has 31 eyeballs. So.
And then Egg has a line where he says, "I am the past come back to haunt you, Lopan." I think this strengthens the argument that Egg is old, and he's probably fought Lopan before.
Yeah. And that could be an allusion to some kind of a reincarnation. Maybe Egg has, unlike Lopan, this is pure speculation, but maybe he has died and come back.
Yeah.
Just, I'm the past, come back to haunt you, or, remember me. But, just like I said, we got to work on that Egg Shen fan fiction. We're going to get right on it, folks. Promise.
We then cut to Lopan being dressed and attended to by the Wing Kong tailors. And Ian, you were mentioning before that when we were looking at this, Lopan right now is the 10-foot tall roadblock. He's a ghost. How is it that they're actually able to dress him?
How is he dressed, period, when you think about that? But if he was going to be dressed in magical clothes, how are these are impressive tailors.
They touch upon this a little bit in the screenplay, actually. I was reading there, and in the screenplay it mentions that the attendees are trying to put clothing on Lopan, which magically fits, but at the same time their hands are going through his body. It's an effect that they talked about in the screenplay, probably hard to actually do in practice on film.
It would have been cool.
That would have been very cool. I could probably come up with a theory that would kind of substantiate the curse, that maybe it works that, as this living ghost, like he's he's semi-solid. I would, to really make it a curse, to really like for it to be a burner. I think it's, when he has a desire, when he has like, oh, an apple, I really want to eat that. Oh, I can't touch it. Oh, I think maybe that's the trigger to the curse. So then, he can wear clothes just as long as he doesn't enjoy it too much.
Huh. That kind of reminds me of the old Patrick Swayze movie Ghost. I think it was the same type of thing there, where he was trying to move a penny, but he could only really do it once he sort of had passion and anger into it, and then he was able to move stuff.
But he didn't have a tailor adjusting his clothes in that.
No. So I have a question about the tailors here. So these are balding older Wing Kong, I am assuming. So did they participate in the alley fights years ago, and now they do this? Is this what, when you retire, you become a Wing Kong tailor?
A promotion, demotion. Yeah. I'm sure one of those guys could tell you about a heck of a street fight that took place in 1935. Yeah, they're probably very close to Mrs. O'Toole back in the 1930s. They could all tell stories about great times of the White Tiger back then.
And I like the fact that Lopan calls Egg a bastard sorcerer.
Yeah, and that kind of goes with the peasant magic. Wherever Egg's coming from, Lopan has that arrogant, aristocratic, not condensation, condescension. Also part of his 2,000-year-old curse.
Well, you did say it was a damp movie, so there.
This is a very damp movie, and and Lopan, doesn't he look a little clammy? Sure.
Yeah.
Your condensation attitude. Me like English a lot.
Well, I like when Lopan talks, I guess he's channeling the Guardian at this point. And so, you get the scene back in the hallway and you see the heroes there. My question is he on loudspeaker at this point? Does everybody hear him? Or is it just Egg? Because, if it is just Egg, I'm wondering, the heroes are just sort of awkwardly standing around as Egg is getting madder and madder.
Oh. Cue it up, because I think it's all about seeing what Wang's reaction is.
They're just looking around in the background, like they're kind of staring. There's this floating eyeball head in front of them, so they're kind of staring at it. But I never thought of that till Josh mentioned that earlier. But it's much funnier that way. It's a good 40 seconds of people just staring into space.
Yeah. Or for that matter, maybe they can hear Lopan, but again, you got this multi-eyed bowling ball staring at you, grinning. So I could see where they'd be a little distracted, especially Jack. Just like, I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I can't believe what I'm seeing. I want to wake up. I want to wake up. I want to wake up. But this is I think you have to point out, this is a big mistake by Lopan, because it's classic supervillain monologuing. And, there's a necessity here because he's revealing the plan so the audience knows. But on another level, he's just giving it all away. He's classic. He's gloating. He's like, oh, you can't stop me. And this is going to happen. And there's nothing you can do. But, now they know the plan.
Well, and we'll notice, this falls a little bit out of the 5 minutes, but, it's another exposition bit, and guess who stops it?
That's right.
So it's a common theme. Like, we're just audiences, we're ready to move on. Let's have our hero push that story forward.
I like this because Jack's on your team. He's on your side. He's like saying, okay, all right, cut this. Let's move on.
Yeah.
He's the editor's best friend.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
enough of that. Couldn't we just put a montage here and be done with it?
Well, the last thing I have here is that Lopan mentions that he will live out his earthly pleasures with Mao Yin. Kind of an interesting little thing to think about. So, yeah. Okay.
I think for Lopan at this point in his life, earthly pleasures might be simply like, going to the market.
Yeah, if this were Family Guy, you'd cut to a scene where you see Lopan and he's there with Miao Yin. They're pushing a shopping cart. Maybe there's a baby around. Some soft music playing. He grabs some macaroni and cheese.
Yeah, it's the monotony of evil. It's just
Well, folks, that wraps up our 5 minutes. So yeah, Ian, was there anything that you wanted to talk about? Some of the stuff that you're working on right now?
Right now I'm on the Judd Apatow Netflix series Love, which I'm working on season 2, and that will air sometime in March. I've got a few more weeks on that, and that's been encompassing my entire life right now. So I'll finish that up. I'm gonna take a little vacation and then find something for next year.
That sounds
exciting.
good.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And as a filmmaker, any insight, anything you want to plug?
No, not much. Not much here. We have a couple of short films on. If you go to fuzzbombstudios.com, FUZZBOM studios.com, we have a great. I know Josh has seen this one. A short horror Passover comedy, because there aren't enough Passover horror movies, called Elijah.
Yes.
That you can find that on YouTube as well, and a few
Definitely
other little
check
films. But no, unfortunately, ever since I really got deep into editing, and I've been working pretty steady, we're working 60 to 80-hour weeks every week on a show. So it actually takes a lot of time out of your life, and I'm raising a family at the same time. So my free time is kind of devoted to them these days.
And that's where your life, like Lopan's, it's the paradox of the curse. You're working in the business, you're working in your field, but you can't touch the earthly desires that you wish.
Yeah, well, the good thing is I don't have many, so we're okay there.
Yeah, but that's cool. You're working in the industry, and working on a Judd Apatow series. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a fun show.
What about you, Brett? What kind of stuff are you working on these days?
Independent little shorts. I have a short movie that's making the rounds in the horror circuit right now. It's been in a couple of festivals. It's called Swing Shift. It unfortunately has nothing to do with Passover or Hanukkah, but man, I got to check out Elijah. But I got so. Yeah, and I think I'll make a shout out to have I mentioned Sensitive 70s Turtleneck Tough Guys before? That was a movie I did with a friend of mine, Jose Montesinos, and that's gotten us a little bit of buzz.
Cool. Yeah, I think you mentioned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
One of the early episodes. So yeah, well,
I'll post a link. You people need to see that. Somehow, like Henry Swanson would fit into that universe, but I'll leave that. You view it, and you be the judge, and we can discuss in a chat room somewhere. So
very good, very good. Well, wrapping up this episode, please be sure to visit us at 5minutesoftrouble.com. You can check out the glove compartment section on that site for some links to some of the references in this episode. We're also on Facebook at 5 Minutes of Trouble, and we have a discussion group called the 5 Minutes of Trouble Truck Stop, so please join and continue the conversation. We're on Twitter at 5 Minutes Trouble. We're also on Stitcher. And if you can, please spread the word about this podcast to your friends. Give us a review or rating on iTunes. We really appreciate it. I also wanted to give a final shout out to some of the other Movies by Minutes podcasts that are out there. Star Wars Minute has started up again with their next season on Attack of the Clones. We also have our friends over at the Airport Minute, Caddyshack Minute, Lord of the Rings Minute, Jurassic Park Minute, and soon to come, The Godfather Minute. So please...
Ooh, The Godfather Minute.
Yes, check out those, an offer you can't refuse. So that pretty much wraps it up, gentlemen. Any final thoughts?
Well, if it's cool, I'm going to keep driving the pork chop here. And what do you guys think? How about... Del Taco for lunch. First Del Taco we see, I'll pull over.
Works for me.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
Well, Ian, thank you very much for being on the show.
Yeah,
thank you for having me.
That's fun, man. Thanks. Hope you had fun.
Always.
You can get out of the closet now.
Oh, thank God.
Unlock the door.
All right. Well, speaking for Brett, this is the Podcast Express signing off. Tune in next week for another 5 Minutes of Trouble. All
right, I'm going to floor this thing. We're looking for a Del Taco.